How is everything?
Fantastic, Victor. Things are great.
Let's see. Any questions that you had from yesterday before we start?
No, Victor. Like I said, I kind of kept asking you the questions as and when you were taking us through the deck. So on the deck itself, right now we don't have any questions, but I'm sure we will have questions when we put together the facilitator guide, the participant guide, and the slide deck. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions for you then.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm trying to make some small edits to the. I've separated this course into two portions, and so some of these folders are slightly misnamed. However, what I was going to get at, what I'm trying to do through this course is start with simple concepts and then build onto these simple concepts. From what the content yesterday was mostly designed for vocabulary, understanding of terms, concepts, science, the physics behind some of this stuff, and so on. The next portion is basically the feature sets, what makes it different, how does this technology work? And that's sort of where we will start today. As I'm chatting, I'm trying to renumber these appropriately. So we started with laser basics, the difference between what the laser does compared to standard manual surgery. We then started with our most key feature, but the most difficult to explain, which is variable numeric aperture, the OCT system. This is our guidance, our eyes in the eye, if you will. We then took a look at the software and what unique functionality, what customization, how we make the surgeon's life simple with things that we have programmed within the software. This one should be 6. This one is 7. So the next portion of this, oops, what did I just do? I think I deleted it. I'll get it back. The next portion of this is basically starting from the outside of the eye and then working our way to the inside of the eye. Now, where did that little folder go? Here we go. From the outside of the eye, we start with the patient interface. From the patient interface, we then move into the docking and how to perform the docking procedure appropriately. From there, we will go to the cornea, then to the capsulotomy, and I'll rename these later so as not to delete it again. From the capsulotomy, then to the fragmentation. So that would be day 1 and day 2. Day 3 will be surrounding proof sources, barrier handling, business exercises. So if we start with where I was mentioning, we will start with the soft-fit patient interface.
Yes, Victor.
You're able to see my screen?
Yes, Victor. We can see your screen.
Okay. So, the LensX laser has a patient interface. The patient interface is the boundary between the laser and the eye. It's called SoftFit. SoftFit is a unique patient interface that is not based on liquid. It is partially based on liquid, but not completely. And what I mean by that, we'll get into this in a bit when we look at competitive systems. So here again, I always try to start with a clear objective of what it is we're going to be learning in the next hour. And that is to understand the unique features, advantages, and benefits of LensX SoftFit patient interface, understand the newest innovation, which is called the multi-curve SoftFit insert. And of course, later on in this presentation, we'll get into more detail. And then understand how LensX laser SoftFit patient interface differs from competitive systems. And it differs greatly in our approach to using laser within the eye. The second slide is a video describing the soffit patient interface. So, same as yesterday, if you understand everything in this video, if you can repeat everything in this video, you pass. You don't need the rest of the course. You don't need to understand anything further. The video, I find, also a very elegant way to review, summarize, go back, and relearn after the course if they should need to have any touch points to re-examine.
Okay, so we can add a note
Video.
on the facilitator guide, perhaps that the video can be played at the end of this module on the patient interface. They can possibly play it again, and maybe they'll look at the video with new eyes. So initially when they looked at it, they didn't know much about it. But now after going through the entire module, when they look at it again, they're able to understand it better.
Quite fine with me, and we can play it twice, once in the beginning, once at the end. Quite fine with me. Good addition. The videos, I am working with Kala, and you may be involved in this, in a QR code library of videos. And what I hope to do is have all of these in a QR page, labeled, and then the participants can go back and use their cell phone or whatever device they wish to use their QR function to trigger the video.
Yes.
So instead of having to have a physical printout of the presentations, they have their participant guide. The participant guide will link them then back into the Alcon Learning Academy, where there will be a video library. The video library will house all of the videos that we will demonstrate during the course.
Okay. Sure, Victor. Kala did speak to me about this, but yeah, we will be engaging in more deeper discussions on that as we go along.
Yes, but the reason I'm keep saying that these videos will become a reference, if you know what's in the video, you know what's in the rest of the module, is because I have that in mind. We will have a place to put all of these videos for easy access without having to have an electronic copy of everything that we're discussing.
Okay.
So let's start with the basics, the basic requirements. What is the engineering, the physics behind developing a patient interface and then using a patient interface? And it's really rather simplistic. The cornea is a curve. The soffit patient interface is a curve, but it is a plastic surface. So as this plastic surface is applied with suction to the cornea itself may have small wrinkles. And if you see the computer cursor, you can see where these small little wrinkles are occurring in the cornea.
Yes.
As the laser energy passes through these wrinkles, it may be less than perfect in getting to the capsulotomy and fragmentation. So these wrinkles cause incomplete laser firing, and if in this area here, the 4 o'clock hour of this capsulotomy, you can see that there's a missing section. So this is not what our customers want. This is not what our customers are paying for. This is not what the technology represents.
The missing area is in slightly green color. Is that the missing area, Victor?
No, it's at the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock position, right where the cursor is.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking. There's almost a patch, right?
Yeah, it's attached.
Yeah.
There was no laser effect because of the wrinkles in the cornea above it. So yes, there's basically no effect. It is attached. If it's attached and it's pulled on, it can rip.
Okay.
If it rips, we're back to possibly needing a vitrectomy.
Okay.
So this is the difficulty in a hard surface interface. They're cheap, they're easy to make, but here's a larger image of these corneal wrinkles. The top image is the first generation of patient interface, which was a hard plastic surface. And as you magnify the image, you can see that it did cause wrinkles on the backside of the cornea, and that led to imperfect performance further deeper in the eye. Soffit is a proprietary soft contact lens. It's part water, it's part silicone. And when we use soft-fit to dock onto the eye, those wrinkles are gone.
Okay.
So in removing the corneal wrinkles, the performance of the laser has increased significantly.
The pre-SoftFit version, Victor, was that also an Alcon product, or right away we started with SoftFit?
No, that was the first generation Alcon product.
Okay. So you're comparing the SoftFit product to an earlier product of Alcon, actually, and how we've improved and evolved.
Yes.
Okay.
And why we have the SoftFit insert. It
Yes.
adds cost. It adds cost to Alcon,
Okay.
but the cost makes a happy customer. The performance of the laser is much better.
Okay.
So this is one of the reasons why we went with the SoftFit insert. The other reason is a liquid-based patient interface, 100% liquid, does not completely eliminate eye movement. Now, by eye movement, I don't mean eye movement in the X and Y directions. All patient interfaces from all laser manufacturers have mild to high suction. And this suction, once applied to the eye, neutralizes all X and Y movement.
Okay.
What I'm talking about here is in the Z dimension. There is movement of the eye.
Okay.
This comes from two places. One is from the cardiac rhythm. The patient is alive. Their heart is beating. The beating heart can cause up to 50 microns of Z-axis movement of the eye.
So when you say Z-axis, it's slightly an upward sort of movement, right? The X and Y would be either right or left. When you say Z, it's slightly upward, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly. Up or down.
Okay, up or down. Okay. Got it.
So if we were standing, it would mean away from the head towards the head.
Yes.
Because in this case, the patient is laying down, you're correct. It would mean the eye slightly moves up or the eye slightly moves back into the eye socket.
Okay.
So the heart rhythm, cardiac rhythm, can produce up to 50 microns of movement. The pulmonary rhythm, breathing, inhaling and exhaling, can cause an additional 200 microns of movement. So now we have two sine waves, one for the heart, one for breathing. If the waves are coincidental, we have a possibility of a maximum of 250 microns of movement.
That's right.
This up and down movement. So so this is what is physically happening. Now a little physics on liquids. Liquids cannot be compressed. This is the basics of a hydraulic system. The reason a single man can lift an automobile with a hydraulic pump is small force applied to liquid can have a very large magnified effect. So water, salt water, oil, hydraulic fluid, any kind of liquid, you cannot compress it. It is an immovable object. If you have a liquid optic interface, the cornea cannot move.
Okay.
It is like the cornea being seated inside of a steel panel. But the patient's alive.
Yes.
So the heartbeat is going and they're breathing.
Yes.
If the cornea can't move, then the rest of the eye moves. Adjacent to the boundary of the cornea, on the underneath side, the anatomy, is the ciliary muscle. Connected to the ciliary muscle are zonules. The zonules are connected to the equator of the cataract. So what happens with a liquid interface is the cataract acts like a trampoline. It's bouncing up and down because the cornea cannot move because it's fixed in liquid.
Okay.
As that happens, the image on the right is what happens. There are many misdirected shots. The laser is cutting where the laser should not be cutting. And we will go into more definition about this and more illustration and more clinical proof as we build through the course.
Would you have a kind of a larger image of some of these images that you've used in this deck? You know, the one even on slide 3, slide 4. Would you have a larger, clearer version of these images, Victor?
Yes. And that's later on when we go into proof sources.
No, it's just to use on the deck.
From,
okay.
What author, what publication, it's all in this deck. And again, this is basically the introduction leading into so there are more images and different images of different examples of misdirected shots. So that was just one of them that I pulled. But yes, everything will be built on. This is the bottom of the pyramid. We have yet to reach the top of the pyramid. There's a lot. So again, there's a lot in these 3 days.
Okay.
And this is just the foundation of why do we use a contact lens? And that's sort of the graph here. The soft fit is this point in between these two, where on the left you have a hard surface, a plastic surface, a glass surface that wrinkles the cornea, that leads to incomplete treatments. On the right, you have a liquid interface, but a liquid interface does not compensate for Z-axis movement, leading to misdirected shots. Soft fit is the balance between these two words. The soft fit contact lens is part water, part silicone. Enough silicone to allow rigidity, but enough water and enough silicone to allow absorption of that Z-axis movement. This is why LensX has fewer complications and fewer misdirected shots.
Okay.
A whole lot to just explain this one slide, but there's much more evidence coming in images and science and so on.
Okay. So what happens exactly to eye movement because of because of soft fit? Is the eye movement, does the silicone kind of absorb the nuances of the eye movement, or what does it do exactly?
Exactly. It is part water, part silicone. As Z-axis movements take place, the cornea is able to move into the soft fit interface. Because the cornea can move with cardiac rhythm and pulmonary rhythm, the cataract is not bouncing like a trampoline.
Okay. So is it stable? The cataract does not move and it's stable because of this? More stable. Okay.
It is more stable.
Okay.
So later on, I will go into more depth. There are misdirected shots with LensX, but much, much fewer than with liquid optic interfaces, and I will show examples of that.
Okay.
So there is no free lunch. No system is perfect. I'm not saying that it's zero movement. I'm saying that it's significantly less.
Yes.
On the magnitude of 23 times less.
Okay.
23 times is 2,300% less.
That's right.
And again, like I said, I don't want to get into those numbers right now. I don't want to get into the proof right now. I don't want to deviate off of concentrating on LensX soft fit, some of the physics, some of the introduction, some of the basics. Later on, we will be covering much more about this in depth.
Okay.
This is a profile and the engineering drawings for the soft fit interface. It is 19.8 millimeters in diameter. The important thing about the 19.8 millimeters in diameter is that we do not have to cut the eyelid in order to use it. One of our competitors, Catalyst, their patient interface is so large that for Asian eyes, they have to use a scalpel to cut the corner of the eyelid in order to insert this. So that's not what patients want. That's not a premium procedure. That's rather a barbaric way.
It sounds barbaric.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. It's not a good. So the 19.8 is the number. That's the feature. But the benefit is it fits in all eyes.
Okay.
Without having to cut the eyelid.
Okay.
It is the smallest diameter patient interface of all the competitive systems out there.
Okay.
Next to the 19.8 is the actual patent. This is patented technology. No one else can copy this. No one else can replicate this.
Okay.
Internally, the field of view, FOV, 12.5 millimeters. So we see beyond the boundary of the cornea. This is one of the reasons why our corneal applications are so good with LensX. Many of our competitors, the field of view is 12 millimeters or less. So you only see the boundary or slightly within the boundary of the cornea. Going beyond the field of view of the cornea, we can optimize the use of the limbus, and we'll get into this later again. There's much more to discuss.
Okay.
And to show you the side profile, the blue cone is the majority of the patient interface. The white area on the bottom is a silicone skirt, and inside this silicone skirt is where the contact lens clicks into place.
Okay.
So, a little bit of a recap, a little bit of a review, and a bit more, and a few additional details. It's a small, universal 19.8 millimeter patient interface, friendly to all eyes, including Asian eyes, without the need of creating a canthalotomy. Canthalotomy is the medical term for cutting the eyelid.
Eyelid, got it.
Profit, because it is part water and part silicone, corneal wrinkles, corneal compression has been eliminated. Because corneal wrinkles, corneal compression has been eliminated, now we have free-formed capsulotomies without any tags or areas of non-treatment.
Why are you talking about free-floating capsulotomy, Victor? So, why is it free-floating?
Floating means all of the edges are free. Floating, remove floating from your vocabulary in this subject. It doesn't float. It's not like a jellyfish swimming inside the anterior chamber. Free floating was the older, from 10 years ago, they said 7 years ago, they said free floating, meaning all of the edges were completely separated.
Okay.
We removed the word floating, and now it's just a free capsulotomy.
Okay, got it.
Meaning there's no fibers, there's no attachments. At the point of having to remove it, it removes easily.
Okay, got it.
Free floating, again, it makes it sound like it's swimming in the eye, and it's not.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
The overall increase in pressure in the eye is 16 millimeters of mercury. So this means if the patient has a pressure of 10, during the procedure, their pressure will go up to 26. If the patient has a pressure of 20, it will go up to 36 during this procedure.
Okay.
LensX increase in pressure is so low, it is approved to be used with patients who have glaucoma.
Okay.
Because this is a silicone contact lens, it's kind of slippery, it's kind of moist. It improves docking and centration. The eye sort of rolls into the patient interface, much like a hand going into a glove. It sort of self-centers, self-docks, guides itself.
Okay.
The soffit patient interface fixates the cornea. Competitors have to fixate the head, meaning competitors use belts around the head to neutralize eye movements. We don't have to cause a claustrophobic effect to the patient or less than ideal optimized feeling and procedure.
Okay.
And because of stability of the eye, reduction of Z-axis movement, ability to see beyond the cornea, we have improved surgical performance. And for each of those three that I just mentioned, we're going to go much deeper later on.
Okay.
Slide number 8 is a video from Dr. Lubeck demonstrating how to insert the soffit patient interface. It's very simple, very quick. If you wish, we can go through the video, or if not, you can see it later. There's not much on the video.
Sure. I'll watch the video later, Victor.
And then my thinking at this point is probably a good spot to make sure everybody understands what was discussed. So this is a little exercise for the individuals and at the tables. What are the features, advantages, and benefits of soffit patient interface? I don't know what I have here for label. I'm not sure what label refers to. Sure. And then the diameter, the field of view, and then the components. So the features are small universal 19.8 millimeter patient interface, eliminates corneal compression, decapsulotomy, low IOP. Anyway, this is the answer to features.
Features, yes.
The advantages to a small 19.8 millimeter patient interface is it fits in all eyes,
Including Asian eyes.
without having to cut the eyelid.
Without capsulotomy, yeah.
Exactly. The advantage to eliminating corneal compression is free capsulotomies in nearly all cases, etc., etc. And then the benefits for the surgeon, a small universal patient interface makes the procedure quicker. They have more confidence in what the laser is doing. The low pressure means they can treat patients with glaucoma, so they're not losing business. They're not having to restrict what they can do within their surgical center. The docking process is simplified and very intuitive because the eye slips into the contact lens. And we don't have to put a belt on the patient's head, so for those with claustrophobia, it's a much more comfortable process. And then the components of the soffit interface are basically two main components. There are others, and we're going to go into more detail, but it's the blue cone and then the soffit contact lens.
Okay.
This is a video. It's not playing, but I think it's in the folder. And basically, this introduces the multi-curve soffit interface. So now soffit comes in 3 flavors, 3 styles: steep, normal, and flat.
Okay.
So now we can customize the patient interface to the patient need
Okay.
for an even better docking process for the surgeon and even better performance of the laser. And this is the marketing message around the multi-curve soffit insert. It takes precision further, man, for everything that's listed here.
Okay, when you say multi when you say multi-curvature, you mean the steep, normal, you mean that difference, right? Or even within steep?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are 3 inserts now available.
So that's why it's multi-curvature?
Pardon?
Is that why it's called multi-curvature, because of the multiple options?
Yes.
Okay.
So depending on the curvature of the patient's cornea, oops, I don't know what I just did. I just made my system angry. Here we go. The physician can now customize the patient interface to what the patient requires. So if you think of a topography, the steeper colors are more red, the bluer colors are flatter, meaning more curvature, less curvature.
So depending on the topography of the eye, the surgeon can choose an appropriate soffit for the patient based on the topography of their eye.
Yes. Better said than topography, the actual clinical term is the keratometry. So
Okay.
based on the keratometry of the patient, the appropriate soffit insert can be selected.
Okay.
And it's these 3 we'll go into the decision tree here next.
Okay.
Which one do you use? So if we start at the top, if you go to the left, if the keratometric values are greater than 46 diopters of curvature, you go with the orange one, steep. If the keratometric values are between 41 and 46 diopters of curvature, stay with the green, the nominal, the one that you have been using all along.
Okay.
If we go to the right, if they have keratometric values below 41 diopters of curvature, use the blue one.
So does this usually vary based on geography, or even within, let's say, the United States, there are people with different, keratometry values? How is it? How does it usually differ, Victor?
Yes. So approximately 90 to 95% of people all over the world will fall into the green.
Okay.
There are 2 to 3% that will fall into the orange.
Okay.
There are 2 to 3% that will fall into the flat.
Okay.
So not very many need them.
Okay.
But if you have a flat cornea, you can use the green insert, the normal one, the nominal one.
Okay.
But you may trap bubbles between the front of the cornea and the patient interface. Those trapped bubbles can cause frustration to the surgeon in the process of trying to eliminate them.
Okay.
So that 2 to 3% of people with flat who are challenging are now easy.
Okay.
On the steep side, a steep cornea, the green patient interface, the normal curvature, you may not get suction. It may not fit onto the eye because the eye is sort of bullet-shaped, and the patient interface is kind of like a circle cut in half. The edges may not attach.
Okay.
So the docking process might be rather challenging or take a longer time.
Okay.
So for that 2 to 3%, using the orange patient interface, that disappears.
Okay.
So the 4 to 6% of challenging corneas are now addressed. And all corneas are easy.
Right.
So this leads into the next slide. Because so few require orange or blue, in boxes of 1.
Okay.
So if we start to the left, this is a box of 10. This is the standard LensX patient interface. The green is the same as what's in the box of 10. But if the surgeon should break a contact lens, need a new one for whatever reason, this is now a much easier process to provide extra patient interfaces without having to order a box of 10 and break open the box of 10.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason why behind the green one.
Okay.
The green and the box of 10 are identical. It's the same thing. The single patient interface, we're hoping less boxes have to be ordered, broken open in order to cannibalize.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it's being fair to...
An orange comes... Yeah.
Yeah, you're being fair to the hospital or clinic. They don't have to procure so many if they're going to have fewer patients who are whose cornea is either steep or flat.
Exactly. So the green one is mostly for inventory control and not having to waste patient interfaces because they're rather costly. Green, orange, and blue come in boxes of 1.
Okay.
So our recommendation is a doctor should have 2 or 3 orange boxes, 2 or 3 blue boxes for those exceptional corneas that they might do once or twice a year.
Okay. There are 2 packets there. Even within the green, they are differently colored. Is there any reason for that?
Yes. So the purple color, which is the next slide, the purple color is the standard LensX soffit patient interface.
Okay.
This is what is inside the box of 10.
Okay.
It has a purple color.
Okay.
The catalog number is slightly different, but if you see purple, you know it's a standard LensX patient interface, which is identical to the green one.
Okay.
The green one has a slightly different catalog number, but there is no difference between the performance, the construction, the material, the shape of the green or the purple.
Okay.
Now, there are differences, however, between the interface used for LASIK flap and the interface used for cataract procedures.
Okay.
For LASIK flap LensX patient interface, there is no soft fit insert. It is a gray label. It has a different catalog number.
Okay.
And the gray RFID cover is gray, bluish gray.
Okay.
The cataract patient interface will have a purple, green, orange, or blue label. It does require the soft fit insert. And the white RFID cover is white.
Okay.
Okay. For LASIK procedures, and this you don't have to write down. These are approximate numbers. You don't write this down. It's just basically to give you a feeling of why the different colors and so on.
Okay.
The LASIK interface is $165.
Okay.
The cataract interface is $300.
Okay.
You cannot use a blue, cheaper interface for cataract functions.
Okay.
And you cannot use the expensive white interface for LASIK. They are not interchangeable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, Victor.
So that's why they have different colors, different identifiers, different catalog numbers, because they are not interchangeable. You cannot use the cheap one for the expensive one or the expensive one for the cheap one.
Okay.
There is a computer chip inside the RFID covers. The computer chip identifies a patient interface as either for cornea function or cataract function. And the software will not be triggered. So if you use a blue one and try to do cataract, you've wasted your money. It will not activate the software. And if you use a white one for LASIK, you've wasted a patient interface. It will not activate the software.
And it cannot be reused either. So it's lost. I mean, if a mistake is made that way.
It's locked.
Okay.
It's a one-way street. It will not allow it.
Okay.
Now to go a little more into detail. The cataract offset interface is on the right. The LASIK interface is on the left. For the right one, using soffit, there is a unique collar that the contact lens locks into, and the silicone skirt is longer. For LASIK, you do not require the soffit insert. The collar that it locks into is not there, so if you put a soffit into the LASIK one, it'll simply fall right back out. And the silicone skirt is shorter in length.
Okay.
And now basically a summary. On the left is the standard LensX patient interface that comes in boxes of 10. In the center is the standard interface in a box of 1, or the steep or flat patient interface, and their catalog numbers. And on the right, the gray label is for LASIK and other corneal functions.
So a clinic can choose to use. So a clinic can choose to go for the multi-curve softwit and buy, let's say, 5 of the normal ones instead of the standard 10 box. They can choose to do it now, right? Okay.
Yes, they can.
Okay.
Yes, they can. So internally, for Alcon people to manage inventory control, or for an account that does less than anticipated or requires a few more, they can order them one at a time.
Okay.
And it just basically allows more flexibility.
Yes.
And then here, I thought another point to stop and review. So the steep insert is what color, what keratometry readings are required, and what is the catalog number. The nominal is what color, green, and it's the same as what? The box of 10.
Yeah. They can even refer to the participant guide and fill this out. They don't have to necessarily remember all of the numbers, but just looking at it and documenting it, I mean, that itself is a good learning process, and at least the color stays in mind.
Yeah, and if we go to the numbers, you'll notice that only the last 3 numbers change.
Okay.
And that's, they don't have to know all these numbers. It's just basically that if it ends in 5, it's the standard one.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So or the last 2 numbers. 25 is standard.
Okay.
574, 76 is a custom order 1 off. And for LASIK, it's 63.
Okay.
So the 80659981, that's all the same pretty much in all of them.
Okay.
And it's just, they don't have to know the numbers. It's just that they realize there are different catalog numbers.
Yes.
So when it comes time that they put in an order for their customer, they're aware they have to pick the right number.
Correct.
The next one is basically now we're getting to the end of the presentations, and it's a summary. And it's what are the benefits. So we went over the features. Now we're going to start discussing the benefits. I don't know why this text is so small. And they're listed here.
Okay.
Because it's part silicone, because it's part water, it helps absorb eye movement. Because it absorbs eye movement, it's a very smooth and accurate placement of laser pulses. Because it's an accurate placement of laser pulses, we don't have broken edges. Because we don't have broken edges, we decrease complications.
Yes, Victor.
Slide 21 is an overview of just the patient interfaces between LensX and the other competitors. So between Catalyst, Lensar, Bausch & Lomb, and Zemer, these are the parameters that I was able to find, oops, wrong thing, and try to list in the table. And this will come back later on when we look at the competitive systems in greater detail.
Okay. So you will be examining each competitor in greater detail later?
Yes.
Okay.
Slide 22 is a summary of what we've been discussing. Liquids cannot be compressed. As a consequence, cardiac and pulmonary rhythms affect the performance of the laser. If the cataract is bouncing inside the eye because of breathing and the heart rhythm, then the laser is firing in the wrong place. If the laser fires in the wrong place, your complication risks go up. And again, we're going to get much deeper into this later on.
Okay.
For slide 23, not that it's wonderful or perfect, but I've kind of tried to put this together. What is the commonality for the competitors' patient interface, and what is soft-fit interface? Competitors all use liquid. The interfaces range from small to large. On the large side, you have to worry about Asian eyes or cutting the eyelid. Because it's all based on liquid, you have to worry about eye movement and misdirected shots. Misdirected shots cause anterior capsular tears. Anterior capsular tears cause a slower Part 2 surgery. Part 2 being phagodynamics inside the operating room. This goes back to yesterday. If I said, if you have a piece of paper with a tear, and you are holding the paper up and pushing outwards, that tear can increase.
Yes.
With soft-fit, all of that is abated. All of that is rectified. It is not based on a liquid. It does compensate for the heart and breathing rhythm. It has a demonstrated fewer misdirected shots that leads to fewer incidences of anterior capsular tears, meaning part number 2, which is inside the operating room, where the eye has to be filled and pressurized, is simpler, back to normal, routine. You don't have to use special care.
Okay.
Slide 24 is some of the marketing materials around the new soft-fit interface.
When you say new, you mean the multi-curvature feature?
The soft-fit in general and the multi-curvature feature.
Okay, soft-fit in general has some improvements.
No improvement, but it's basically included in here.
Okay.
So there are videos animations, sales aids, and so on. This is a collection of all of the new material that we have to help support the conversation about soffit in the field.
For the ILT, will you be giving links to all of this material so that this will be another place where they can get this material?
The reason for that is each region will customize this differently.
Okay.
So the region will provide a link, but not us.
Okay, got it.
And it's very, very silly inside the world of Alcon. Sometimes a single word is good or a single word is bad.
Okay, so that's why you let the
And usually it's
regions...
just little words that are changed. So India will have a slightly different version than China, will have a slightly different version than Japan. And it's simply that. It's just like, I don't like this word. Change it to that.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. But anyway, that's why we don't provide links to marketing materials. This is the global, these are the global assets.
Okay.
The global team sends it out to the region.
Okay.
The region will then customize it and verify that all of the language is appropriate for their market.
Okay.
And then they will, change it if need be.
Okay.
And actually the same with the training material. What we are preparing now
Yes.
may yet be altered downstream. The facilitator guide and the participant guide will be given to the regional training managers.
Okay.
Their responsibility is to put it through their local approval process.
Okay.
And some of this may change. But that's downstream. That's not for us to worry about.
Okay.
Now, from my part, knowing that, I try my very best to provide the proof sources of everything that I have in my presentations.
Okay.
So knowing that my customer downstream has to go through a legal process, I try to back up everything that I put into these presentations.
Okay.
Ready for the next one?
Yes, Victor.
Okay, so we started from the outside of the machine, variable numeric aperture, the OCT guidance system, unique features within the software to allow for customization, soffit interface. Now we're going to start approaching the eye. In approaching the eye, we have a program of how to properly dock onto the eye. Docking is the most important part of this entire process. If docking goes well, then everything else goes well. If there is poor docking, if the eye is not properly aligned at the beginning, then everything becomes much more difficult.
Okay.
So, again, first slide, the objective. Docking is critical. Docking is important. Docking is essential to do appropriately. If docking is done well at the beginning of the process, as I said before, everything goes very, very well. And docking is as simple as align, approach, secure. So that's the first part of this presentation. The second part of the presentation is what happens? What do you do if the patient has a large nose, large bone structure, or something of that nature? And it's really not that difficult. It's just identifying this person has a large nose while they're in the clinic, and then when they go to the operating room, there's an advisory of some sort. This one's got a large nose, and you prepare appropriately.
Okay.
Slide number 2 is a video of the docking process. I'll let you watch that later.
Okay.
And just, it's really simple. Use the system, use the OCT guidance, use what the software is telling you, use your own judgment, look at the eye, continue.
Okay.
This is now going a little bit more into detail. Docking is the most important step to ensure successful and well-centered treatments. It is important to maintain a well-centered and flat dock we'll discuss in a moment, to avoid off-center incisions and cuts. You must see 360 degrees of the eye. Avoid excess fluid on the patient interface or on the cornea. And docking is as easy as align, approach, and secure. So in alignment, on the left is optimal, on the right is less than optimal. And you can see the small red trapezoid.
Yes.
If we align the eye appropriately, then that incision is exactly where we think it's going to be. If we are misaligned in our docking, then that incision is not going to be where we wanted it to be. We will have to hunt for where that incision is. We will have to poke the eye continually trying to find that opening.
Okay.
So, step number 1, make sure that the patient is in a linear fashion laying down. Legs are not crossed, body is not twisted, head isn't at an angle to the rest of the body.
Okay.
Make sure that the patient is appropriately positioned in the surgical bed, that they're not at an angle, that they're not twisted. So we want everything basically at 90 degrees as much as possible. So the patient 90 degrees within the bed 90 degrees to Lensax, the head 90 degrees to the laser.
Okay.
One thing that's rather silly, but nobody realizes, is you have to check the pillow of your surgical bed. If it's very soft, then the patient will push their head backwards. This is a normal human response. If you have something approaching your eye, your natural instinct is to move in the opposite direction to get away from that. So if you have a very soft surgical bed pillow, you may need a silicone support to hold the head in place so the patient doesn't run away from you.
Okay.
And so I thought this would be a good point for alignment. What is the proper body position? What is the proper head position? What is the proper eye position? And they should be simplistic. I don't think anybody, this doesn't take that much explanation. The body should be square and not off angle. The legs should not be crossed. The arms should not be crossed on top of the body. The head position should be square to the body, square to the laser. And the eye position should be parallel to the floor, parallel to the laser objective.
Okay.
So that's align.
Okay.
Approach. There are facial structures that you have to be aware of, such as the brow, cheek, and nose. Probably the most important thing that everybody forgets is simply verbal anesthesia. This is what you will see, this is what you will feel, this is what you will hear. This is normal. Does this make sense? Just simply talk to the person, let them know what to anticipate, what are the sounds that are going off, all the beeps and all the movement that's happening inside the operating room. For cataract surgery, people are generally not fully asleep. We generally just use topical anesthetic.
Okay. Okay. Hello? Hello, Purnima, you're there? Hello? Purnima, you're there? Hello?
Victor?
Has joined the conference.
Hello?
Hi, Victor. When you were talking about topical anesthesia for cataract surgery, I think we just couldn't hear you. Did you get disconnected or something?
No, on my side there was a great deal of static.
Okay.
I had to pull the phone away from my ear, and it was just deafening. So I hung up and thought, well, there's something wrong in the line. You know what I mean? The connection went bad.
Okay. Sometimes it happens. Is the line better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, much better.
Okay.
So back to where we were. Generally.
Hello? Hello? Hello, Victor? We're not able to hear you, Victor. Hello? Hello? Purnima, are you there? Samhita, are you there? Lakshmi?
1 moment, please.
Hello?
Hi, Victor.
Sorry, you sound like it's breaking up. Can you say it again?
Can you hear me better now?
No, yeah, I can't understand a word you're saying. Let's hang up and try again.
Okay, Victor, we'll do that. Okay.
Victor?
Has left the conference.
Purnima, are you there? Samhita? Is that Purnima?
Victor?
Has joined the conference.
No?
How is the line now, Victor? Is it any better?
A bit better, quite a bit better.
Okay.
Okay, so back to where we were.
So you were just saying that for cataract surgery, topical anesthesia is given to the patient, and the importance of verbal anesthesia, the need to interact with the patient in the OR.
Has left the conference.
Hello?
Yes, Victor?
Sorry, there was someone entering or exiting, and it sounded like the phone was being redirected somewhere else. Anyway, yeah, so verbal anesthesia. This is what you will see. This is what you will feel. These are the sounds you will. Just give the person an idea, so that they're not very anxious.
Okay.
So, as I was saying in the earlier presentation, when we were looking at the OCT system, we have live OCT to help in the docking and guidance process. So this is before suction is applied to the eye. Along the top of the software will be these little arrows. So an arrow pointing left, down, to the right, up, and to the left. And this is basically telling the patient or helping the physician determine you need to look a little up or a little down or look a little this way to make the docking as good as possible before securing the eye with suction.
Okay.
In this example, we have the video monitor OCT on the left.
Okay.
On the right would be the live OCT guidance. In this image, you can see that the cornea, the anterior capsule, and the posterior capsule all look just about like parallel lines. This is perfect. This requires no additional adjustment. You can apply suction and continue with your laser procedure.
Okay.
If the eye was looking in the wrong direction, then when you look at this monitor, for example, towards the left, if the patient is looking too much to the right, the return, the image, what you would see is sort of like a mountain peak. And this mountain peak points to look to the left.
Okay.
So you would say to the patient, look slightly towards your left ear. As they move their eye, this mountain peak would disappear and it flattens out.
Okay.
In the other example, we have a mountain peak pointing towards 270 degrees. This means they're looking too far up towards the top of their head. In this case, you would say, look slightly down, or look slightly towards your feet, or look slightly towards your chin. As the eye moved, as they rolled downwards, that mountain peak would go away. You would have a straight line going across. This is like the straight line of the cornea. And then you would apply suction.
Okay.
Slide number 12 shows what good docking looks like. 360 degrees of the eye are visible. The area between the color of the eye and the white of the eye, between the iris and the sclera, is equal, 360 degrees. So you have the same white on top, on the bottom, on the left, and on the right. So this looks like a bullseye pattern. It's a circle within a circle within a circle.
Okay.
Slide 13 is not good.
Okay.
You can see that there's a crescent of white towards the left.
Yes.
There's no white on the right.
Yes.
And further emphasized by this illustration, you can see how this is not a circle within a circle.
Yes.
Now remember, before I said there is a straight line going across, meaning the eye is flat, you can apply suction.
Yes.
This is an example of that mountain peak. You can see that the eye is not flat, the eye is quite off angle, and you do not want to proceed with applying suction. You should lift the laser Again, explain to the patient what they should be doing. They should be looking at the red fixation light, and then try again.
Okay.
So slide 14, I think, is a place to stop, pause, and review. What OCT guidance does LensX provide? And there are several. We have docking indicators for which way the eye should move. We have live OCT. We also have references within the software of where the anatomy should align.
Okay.
What does flat dock look like? And it should look like a series of parallel lines. From the front to back of the cornea, to the back of the cornea, through to the anterior capsule to the posterior capsule, it should all look like parallel lines. What does poor docking look like? That would be part of the eye you could see the white of the sclera, the other part you couldn't. On the OCT imaging system, you would see a mountain peak in some area of the screen.
Yes.
And the last question, what is the consequences of not having a proper docking process? And that is that your incisions may not be where you want them. You may have to go searching for them.
Okay.
Slide 15 is now the third part, secure. So we align, approach, secure. How do we secure? Securing the eye is very simple. You use the joystick shown on the left image to bring the system down onto the cornea. There is a pressure indicator. When the pressure indicator is in the appropriate area, you touch the software command for suction to start. As the soft fit contact lens touches the eye, a fluid wave will be seen going across the eye. Once you see the fluid wave, that's the appropriate signal to secure it with suction.
Okay. For this slide, do you have larger, better quality images, Victor? No,
I mean, all we can do is make these larger.
Okay.
These are the only images I have.
Okay.
I don't have a better quality example.
Okay. Okay, Victor.
So here it's just basically a three-dimensional perspective, I'm trying to make a three-dimensional perspective. If the eye is in the proper position, you have three parallel lines. That means the eye is in the center of your patient interface, and now your software will align where? Well, that's on the left. On the right, if the eye is off-angled, the patient's not looking in the proper direction, you apply suction. All of your patterns will be slightly off in where they are actually located in the eye. And this is an example of, again, like the prior examples. In this example, if you look at the software patterns for where the incisions are programmed to be in relation to where the eye actually is once captured with suction, this corneal incision is actually now onto the white of the eye, meaning you may not find it at all. And the rest of the capsulotomy and fragmentation patterns are now way too inferior, meaning the placement of your IOL may be affected.
So in that case, they have to start over, right? Hello?
Say again, please.
No, in that case, if the docking process isn't got right, like you said, it may lead to other complications. The incision may not be correct, accurate.
Sorry, I can't hear you. I'll dial in again. Say again?
Can you hear me now, Victor? Can you hear me?
Victor has left the conference.
Lakshmi?
To listen to your name, press 1. To re-record your name, press 2. Or just hold the line to enter the conference. 1 moment, please. Has joined the conference.
Hello?
Hi, Victor. I also kind of dialed in again. I disconnected and dialed in. I thought maybe there's a problem with this line as well. Is the line any better now, Victor? Sorry about this.
Oh, no worries. That's technology. That's the way it is. Don't worry about it. So, slide 18. There are anatomical considerations to consider. The top image is a condition called pannus. Pannus are large abnormal blood vessels growing into the cornea. If you have an incision in this area, your patient is going to bleed. You will cut those blood vessels. The middle image is something called arcus, or to be more specific, arcus senilis, which is a deposit of cholesterol in the cornea with age. With arcus, it may be very difficult to find the true limbal border because it's obscured by this white ring.
Okay.
And again, your incisions may be very difficult to find. The third image is called Bell's phenomenon. And it's if people are severely anesthetized, nearly asleep, or not paying attention, their eyes can roll upwards and outwards, making the docking much more difficult.
Okay.
Slide 19 are two other anatomical considerations. The top one is called a pinguecula. Pinguecula is a deposit of fat under the white of the eye. This may make getting suction challenging. And the bottom image is called a pterygium. A pterygium is an abnormal sheet of skin growing on the surface of the eye, growing onto the cornea. If you have an incision in this area, they're going to bleed.
Okay.
You may have difficulties with suction, and this is probably not a good eye for the incisional portion of Lensax.
Okay.
So slide 20 is basically a summary of what would make securing the eye challenging. So number one in securing the eye, making it challenging, is the patient is not looking in the right area, and you have not aligned the laser appropriately. Number two would then be physical anatomical conditions, such as pannus, arcus, Bell's phenomenon, pinguecula, pterygium. Lumps and bumps on the surface of the eye that may cause the eye to slip off center, or make docking difficult, or make the ability to create suction challenging.
Okay. Yes.
So what else, slide 21, what else can cause challenges, difficulties, if we don't think about them and plan before we start? Patient head misalignment, gurney or the surgical bed misalignment, the metallic lid speculum, the device that goes in the eye to open the eyelids. The patient interface might bump into it. So we have to make sure that the eye is opened enough and we have enough clearance that the silicone skirt does not hit onto the metal speculum. Because the patient interface is a cone coming downwards towards the eye, then the patient's nose, cheek, and brow have to be taken into consideration. That the patient interface isn't bumping into the nose, cheek, or brow.
Okay.
Excessive or loose conjunctiva. Conjunctiva is the clear skin on the white of the eye. Older people have wrinkly skin. Wrinkly skin can move. If you have a patient with excessive wrinkly skin on the eye, you have to take this into consideration. And there are people with very deep-set eyes, in which docking may also be challenging. So the call out here, the caveat, the main message, not all patients can be successfully docked. There may be a very small percentage that, although want LensX, may not be appropriate for LensX because of anatomy, scarring, physical attributes, the limitations of the system.
So some of these can be identified much before they even come to the procedure, right? Like steep eyes or large eyes,
Yes.
large nose. Those are things...
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And of course, this sounds like common sense. Of course, someone with a large nose, you may have difficulty. But until we bring it to light, until we bring it into the discussion, people just don't realize it. So this is very obvious now that you know it, but before knowing it, and this is basically learning from the 1.5 million eyes that we've performed to date. This sounds ridiculous, it sounds simplistic, but this is what people forgot, and this is why they have difficulty.
Okay.
Or this is why they generate complaints. You know what I mean? The laser, it's not the fault of the laser. They didn't pick the right patient for the right procedure.
Right.
But the laser gets the blame for it.
Okay.
Slide 22 is an example of a person with a very large nose. Now, in this case, you do not have to stop using LensX. All you have to simply do is move the nose away from the patient interface. Ensure that moving the nose away and slightly rotating the head, you still have full access to the eye.
Right.
And that the patient interface is not hitting the metal speculum. So it's that simple. Slightly move the nose away from the center and then reposition everything.
Right.
Slide 23. What happens if you have someone with very prominent cheeks? You have them look slightly downwards. So you move the cheeks slightly away from the patient interface. Again, you ensure that you have complete opening of the eye, complete coverage of the eye is accessible, and that you're not hitting the speculum.
Okay.
Sounds simplistic, but trust me, this is where most people get into trouble.
Okay. So they go ahead and do the procedure on such people, and then the results are not what's expected.
Oh, but then it's the patient interface is bumping their forehead, and they're wondering, why isn't this machine working? Because you're on the forehead. Look at what you're doing. Slide 24 is an example of someone with very prominent brows, a very large forehead. Mm-hmm. In this case, you would tilt the chin slightly upwards, pushing the brow slightly away from the patient interface. And again, 360-degree clearance. You can see all of the eye. Go ahead and approach and dock. And then slide 25 is all three. Large nose, large cheek, large brow, and a very deep-set eye. This may be the most challenging.
Okay.
Remember, the length of the patient interface has a finite length. The bone structure is so high, and the eye is so deep that it's beyond the limit of that length. You can't dock. You can't use LensX.
Okay.
So the call out on big nose, big cheeks, big brow, or the trifecta, all three together, is to identify this before taking the patient to LensX. In the surgical chart, in the clinical chart, someone should make that annotation. This patient may be challenging because of a large nose. And then the surgical staff has an idea, slightly position the nose away to allow full clearance. Sounds very simplistic, but again, when you're doing 50 surgeries a day, the simple things are forgotten.
Yes.
So let me pause here for a moment. We have two teams. We have the clinical application specialists that sit down with the physicians, their nurses, and their technicians and train them on how to use LensX. And then we have the sales team that may be there when the CAS is not present. So these are little pearls, little guidance, little insights for the sales team to follow when the clinical application specialist is not present.
So if a surgeon or if one of the clinic staff approach the salesperson and tell them about a problem, they should be able to, based on this training, just give them some suggestions in the absence of a CAS?
Precisely. Exactly. So if they see something wrong, they have an idea of what is wrong, why it's wrong, and how to possibly fix it. This is not to make them a clinical application specialist. It's to give them the knowledge and the comfort. If they're there alone, they know what they're looking at, and if the doctor is having a difficult time, they may be able to see why.
Okay.
So, the other challenging case or subset of cases would be someone who has had prior LASIK surgery. Their corneas have been altered, and this is where the orange or blue patient interfaces really become important. So if there is an Alcon sales member in a clinic or in a surgical theater, and they see that a person coming to LensX has had refractive surgery, the first thing they should ask is, what are their keratometry readings and which insert are you using?
Okay.
And is the appropriate insert being selected? And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, most of the difficulty in docking is because the pillow is too soft and the patient is moving away. So they may want to check into the availability and who manufactures silicone, hard silicone, gel pillows to make this a more streamlined process. We don't make these pillows, but they're accessible basically everywhere in the world.
So you make some standardized recommendations for the pillow also to avoid a...
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So if it's very, very soft, look into getting one of these or changing the bed. But changing the bed is rather expensive. Adding a pillow is rather inexpensive.
Right. Again, the patient bed is also an Alcon product, right? If they use the Alcon patient
They will
bed...
use what is standard in the hospital. Whatever the hospital uses to move patients around.
Okay. All right.
We don't make the bed. We've learned that the quality of the bed and the stiffness of the pillow is very important for LensX.
Okay.
And someone should check. And someone should make these adjustments before LensX arrives and then during the first few cases. And then it becomes part of their standard routine.
Okay.
slide 28 is basically a review of the troubleshooting points that we just went through. Big nose, high cheekbones, large brow, all three together, or someone who has had refractive surgery. For a big nose, high cheeks, large brow. For big nose, the head would be moved the nose would be moved away from the patient interface. High cheekbones, the chin would be rotated down slightly. Large brow, the chin would be rotated up slightly. All three together, you can slightly adjust the nose away, try to make the eye as flat to the docking as possible, and then attempt to dock. If the eye is not too deeply set, you will be able to dock. We have not found it yet, but there is yet the possibility of someone with such sunken eyes, we simply can't reach it. And then for a refractive surgical patient who has had cornea LASIK, ensure that the proper patient interface is selected based on the keratometry values.
Yes.
Ready to continue?
Yes, Victor.
Okay, so slide 29. Before I was mentioning three parallel lines, or three relatively parallel lines during the docking procedure, during the approach, align, and secure methodology. Now we're going to go a little bit more into detail of what these lines represent. So on the left is a drawing of the cornea, the anterior chamber, the cataract, and the circle of where the OCT will be measuring. On the right, you see a black grid representing the cornea, anterior capsule, and posterior capsule. So these are the three lines that we're looking for. The upper line is the cornea, the front and back of the cornea. The middle line is the front of the cataract. The back is the last line deepest down, furthest down, is the back side of the cataract. If everything is wonderful and perfect and the patient is properly aligned and we have applied suction and there's been no movement and there's nothing there to disturb what we're doing, we will see that the cornea, the anterior capsule, and the posterior capsule look like three parallel lines. We can continue. This is quite fine. This is perfect. This is optimal. This is what we will be trying for. Slide 31 shows a small amount of tilt. The patient was off by a few degrees, but we are still fine. On the right, you see the top line is the cornea. It appears perfectly flat. But then the anterior capsule return and the posterior capsule return look sort of like the letter S laying down. This is also quite fine. If we look to the left, we can see that although the lens is tilted, it is still within the range of where we want, meaning the center of the cataract is in alignment with the center of the circle. We have tilt compensation. The software will determine where is the mountain, where is the valley, and it will direct the laser to go up and down these slopes. We're okay.
Okay. So a slight tilt is accommodated, can be accommodated.
Yes.
Okay.
We're fine. Continue. This is within the boundaries of the system.
Okay.
You don't have to stop.
Okay.
Slide 32 looks sort of like a fish pattern. You can see, let's start on the left. You can see on the left, we are not in the center of the cataract. We are off-center.
Yes.
In being off-centered, this will affect the alignment and performance of the IOL. Being off-centered is called translation. You can see on the right the return from the cornea to the anterior capsule to the posterior capsule. The anterior and posterior capsule return, it looks kind of like a fish silhouette. You may want to stop and redock. And the reason, if we go back to the right image, you are not in the center. Your IOL will not be centered.
Okay. So for redocking, the softfit interface need not be replaced. They can continue to use the same interface for redocking.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. And we're talking about seconds between applying the patient interface,
Okay.
aligning, approaching, securing, looking at the monitor
Yes.
before continuing. We're looking at seconds.
Yes.
So if in worst case scenario, if this happened, it's a software command to stop suction. It
Okay.
stops instantly.
Okay.
You raise the laser about a centimeter,
Okay.
reposition everything so it looks like a series of circles within a circle, like a bullseye pattern,
Okay.
and then zero down back onto the eye. Everything looks like, then you have 3 parallel lines. You apply suction again.
Okay.
Slide 34. We are off-centered, and the eye is off alignment. So now we have rotation plus translation. And in this case, it looks like half of a fish pattern. We see the cornea and the anterior capsule return look parallel, but the posterior capsule return, image return, looks like a letter S, kind of like a half fish or a lazy S, whatever you wish to describe this as.
Okay.
In this case, again, if you look back to the right, where would your IOL finally be placed in this cataract bag? It's not where you want it. This will impact the vision of the patient.
Okay.
So again, stop, lift, realign. Slide 34 is basically a review. The top left pattern is ideal. Top right, we're okay. This is what the system is made for. This is going to be the majority of cases. And then the bottom 2 images, you might want to take a look before you continue.
Okay.
Slide 35, again, a recap. If you have someone with LASIK, was it hyperopic or myopic LASIK? Do they have a steeper than normal or flatter than normal? And has the proper patient interface been selected?
Okay.
And then slide 36 is basically a summation of everything. The top pearls, the do's and don'ts. So, in order to help with the docking process, cover the fellow eye so the patient isn't looking about, at the ceiling or other things in the room. Align the patient in the gurney and align the head and the patient in the gurney to the laser. Try to keep the head as parallel to the floor as possible. Adjust your illumination appropriately to give you the proper contrast. Very important, don't forget to use verbal anesthesia to allow the patient to understand what they will see, hear, and sense. Use the technology found in the video microscope to help you dock appropriately. And then use the guidance, like I was just mentioning, use the appropriate guidance before applying suction and after applying suction.
Okay.
If this goes well, everything else goes well.
Okay.
So any questions on that section before we continue?
No questions, Victor.
Okay. So, again, we've started from the outside of the eye. We are now on the eye. The next thing we will look at is cornea.
Okay.
We will start from the outside of the eye and continue on into the deeper layers of the eye. Now, this is somewhere where I don't know what to do. And the reason I don't know what to do is this is such a large section.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to handle it. So let me open the presentation in general, and I believe it's over 100 PowerPoints long.
Okay.
125.
Okay.
So what I've done in the PowerPoint I just opened is everything cornea. What I've done in the facilitator guide and in the participant guide is assigned sections. So I'm assuming there will be at least 12 participants at a table. Each table would select a certain function and then investigate that function and then report back to the class.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's good or bad. I just don't know how to fit 125 PowerPoints into a 3-day.
No, this sounds like a good plan. This sounds like a good plan, Victor. That's also it's a sort of a cooperative technique used in learning where each person does parts of the work, then everyone comes together and makes the presentation. And then as they present, everyone else is listening, and you'll be there, of course, to facilitate that entire discussion. So this is a very good strategy.
Exactly.
And any which ways, the participant guide can be made available to them, since it's going to be a digital participant guide. It can be made available to them a little earlier, or some parts of this presentation can be given to them as part of the pre-work. So they have the big picture, and then when they get to class, they can do just their portion at their table.
Yes. Exactly. So because this is so large, I've broken it down by chapters. So if we start on, there are 9 chapters in this section. The first 6 have to do with cataract. The last 3 have to do with refractive capabilities. And I've tried to start it from the simplest and then build on complexity as I have throughout the entire presentation. And then I've referenced, manual incisions are from pages 3 to 11, and then 12 to 21, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My thinking, as you were just mentioning, is either as pre-work or in the classroom, someone would be assigned Chapter 3. That table would analyze Chapter 3, come up with their talking points, and then present it back to the rest of the class.
Yes.
So if we start with incisions, we need to first start with understanding what is done by hand. And it's not as easy as you think. So what we need to consider, what we need to anticipate, what we need to understand is when they do surgery by hand, there are a cascade of events that all have to be understood. The phaco needle goes inside of a sleeve. That sleeve has a certain color, and that color demonstrates a certain diameter. That is how you properly construct an incision, and I'll explain what I mean in a moment. Also important to know is what style, what type of IOL is being implanted, because the injector delivery systems vary within Alcon and vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So many times it may be a small incision, but a very large sleeve or injector, and the wound is stretched or torn. So you have to first determine what are they doing by hand, and then work backwards into this is what I want LensX to do, to best match what this doctor is doing.
Okay.
That makes sense so far?
Yes, it does.
So what dictates what blade to select, what blade diameter in constructing an incision, depends on the surgical technique, the parameters being used with the phaco unit, and the skill of the surgeon. So as an example of sleeves, everything in a surgical suite is color-coded. This way, simply looking across the room, you can see what's on the surgical table, and you know what sizes the colors represent. So in our sleeves that go around the needles that go inside the eye, they are color-coded into blue, violet, green, and the colors, again, represent the diameter. So for the Ultra product line, which is a pinkish color, they require a 2.1 to 2.5 millimeter incision. The micro platforms, which are purple and blue, require 2.6 to a 3.0 incision size, and so on up the line. Inside these sleeves fit phaco needles. So which phaco needle are they using, and is it the appropriate sleeve, and what size incision do you have to make so that everything fits and you don't tear or stretch the wound, which then causes other problems down the road. We make the blades, we make the surgical instruments for hand surgery, and these are some of the examples of the top systems, the top blades that we create and put into custom packs. So the clear-cut Intrepid micro coaxial blade comes in blue, and blue means it's a 2.2 or a 2.4 millimeter blade. The clear-cut blades are pink, and pink means 2.75 millimeters. And for the side port incisions, they usually have a yellow color, and yellow means between 1 to 1.5 millimeters in size. So, a surgical representative going into the operating room, they should be able to identify blue, pink, or yellow, and then they should be able to determine pink, green, blue, or purple, and do all of these things match. And if they match, now we know what to program in LensX. So far, so good?
Yes, Victor.
So I guess in a different type of thinking, you cannot make a glove until you know if the hand has 5 fingers, and the size of the fingers and the size of the hand. Once you know that there are 5 fingers and the length and dimensions of the fingers in the hand, you can make a glove. Meaning you can't simply program LensX for a average size incision. You have to know what the surgeon is using and then work backwards from there to determine, is this too big? Is it too small? Will it be comfortable? Will it be uncomfortable?
Okay.
So, surgical blades have different characteristics in how they move within the eye, within the cornea. And it's called bevel up, bevel down, or dual bevel. This will determine how the instruments go into the eye and the feeling that the surgeon has at his fingertips as things enter and leave the eye. So a bevel up incision with the bevel facing upwards, these blades tend to plane downwards. These are used for creating a valve or an internal sealing point. An internal angle, an internal sealing point, medically it's called a valve. A bevel down instrument tends to move upwards as you move it through the cornea. These are not very much used. And the reason for that is they will cause the wound to leak or iris prolapse, which is the color of the eye being expelled from the eye. So we don't make them anymore, but some manufacturers still make them. Most surgeons don't use these. And then there is dual bevel. There's an equal angle on top and on the bottom. These do not plane upwards, and they don't plane downwards. They're rather neutral, and the way you point them is the way they go.
Okay.
Now, why I have gone into this detail. There are two things that surgeons really understand, really rule their life, really help form their opinions. One is, what am I seeing? Surgeons really understand their microscopes. They know what they look at because they do it every day. So they are very critical in the quality of their microscope and what they see, how much they see, how deep they see, how much contrast, how much color, etc. The other thing that surgeons really understand is what their fingertips feel. That's called muscle memory. Much like golf or tennis or an Olympic gymnastic, they do the same repetitive motion over and over and over again until that motion is instinctual. Surgeons take years to decades to develop the feeling in their fingertips to tell them what is happening in the eye. So changing, altering, shifting these feelings causes for unhappy surgeons.
Okay.
This is why we have to understand what instruments they're using by hand, what it might feel like for adding instruments during the rest of the surgical procedure, and then going backwards, how to best tailor LensX to make it feel as natural as they've always done without having to relearn everything. So that's section one, is basically understanding what is done by hand, what are the requirements, what do we have to measure in order to make the glove.
Okay.
Section two has to do with transitioning from creating an incision by hand to what it'll feel like when you use LensX. So the advantages, as we mentioned in the prior introduction from the day before, LensX has benefits in terms of corneal incisions in allowing the concept of bladeless surgery to be discussed to patients. For a human being, one of the most frightening things is something approaching their eyes. We all have this same instinctual fear. None of us are happy with some small, pointy, sharp thing coming at us, especially towards our eye.
Yes.
As I was mentioning yesterday, we can make very sophisticated patterns. We can make multi-plane, meaning a single, two-plane, or three-plane incision, but also combine it with different geometrical patterns, such as trapezoid in, trapezoid out, or rectangular. And again, this all has to do with finger movement or hand movement. So what are the common complaints? What are we hearing back in the 1.5 million eyes that we've done? Most surgeons basically say the same thing at the beginning until they learn, until their fingers start to determine the detail of what the differences are. The first common barrier is they aren't consistent. I wanted it at 12 millimeters, it's not at 12 millimeters. The other is that they're too anterior, meaning they're too far up the slope of the side of the cornea. The other one is they are hard to open or they are hard to close. And the last one is they don't feel like what I've become accustomed to by what I do by hand.
Uh-huh.
So for these 5 top barriers or complaints, the next series of slides goes into why and how to fix it. So, slide 15. We generally start and recommend that surgeons start with a 2.4 millimeter incision in diameter. The reason for that is it matches most of our instrumentation when they do phaco, and it matches the cartridge that goes in the eye to deliver the IOL, which is our Monarch D cartridge. But if you recall from that video, when we saw the physician make an incision by hand, he went in, but on the way out, he pulled to the left. So although the scalpel was labeled 2.4 millimeters, what he created was something greater than 2.4 millimeters.
That's right.
Because this is muscle memory, this is what he has done for 20 years, every incision that he makes is going to be much larger than he thinks.
Okay.
So initially, if we program a 2.4 millimeter incision with Lenvex, they're going to say, this doesn't feel right. It's much too small. It's much too tight. I cannot put my instruments into the eye comfortably. And the reason for that is, doctor, you never made a 2.4 millimeter incision. You were making 2.5 or greater. So for the first few cases, don't program a 2.4 millimeter incision. Program a 2.5, 2.55, or 2.6. After the first 5, reduce it by a half a millimeter. After the next 5, reduce it another half a millimeter again, until they're finally down to 2.4, and it's operating the way they think, and the feeling in their fingers now matches, and it's understood by what they're doing.
Okay.
So far, so good?
Yes. No, only I'm just beginning to realize, the amount of work that goes into this. It's not just about the laser. It's got to do with interacting with the surgeons, talking to them, convincing them, giving them that time to get acclimatized with the Len6.
Yes, precisely. Exactly. It's new. It's different. It's foreign. It takes a little time. Once you get used to the feeling, then you realize, ooh, this works as advertised. Mm-hmm. So the next thing to consider is the surgeon technique, their hand position, and whether they're left-handed or right-handed. The instrumentation used, as mentioned before, as determined by the color codes. And most importantly, what do they do during the phaco operation to remove cortex material at the end of the cataract case? And I'll describe this in greater detail as we go.
Okay.
So, challenges with incisions have to do with identifying where is the true anatomical limbus. The anatomical limbus is the junction between clear corneal tissue and the white of the sclera. Looking at the eye, it's very difficult to know and find it. There are many challenges in determining exactly where is that boundary. And then the video monitor, the quality of the video monitor, the lighting of the video monitor could cause additional challenges in determining where is this true boundary. And then anatomical changes, as we discussed earlier, with pannus, arcus, loose conjunctiva, other abnormalities in that boundary, that limbus. And then there's also inherent parallax. There's a slight misalignment between the two-dimensional image that we represent on the video monitor and the three-dimensional actual anatomy.
Okay.
So, a little review of what is Panis, what is Arcus senilis, what is Bell's phenomenon, and the understanding that LensX laser works best through clear media. So in a case of Arcus, Arcus is white, it's cholesterol deposition in the cornea. LensX may not perform up to its top level in the cornea. If there's a severe amount of Arcus, you may want to make the incision by hand. And to summarize the other ones, pinguecula and pterygium. We've discussed these before. I'm bringing them back just as a reminder. These are also factors, especially pterygium, in the creation of corneal incisions. And then in this example, it's not the best of examples, it's the best image I can find, but basically you cannot, in this example, if you look really closely, you can't determine where the clear of the cornea stops and the white of the eye begins. There's about a millimeter and a half of area of discrepancy. And that millimeter and a half is all the world of difference for a surgeon.
Okay.
And then the most important thing, which I cannot put in this presentation, I usually draw it out on a whiteboard or a flip chart, and that is, what is cortex removal? And now that I think about it, maybe I can try to either draw something and put it in a PowerPoint, or find some pictures and put it in a PowerPoint.
Yeah, we could do that. Hello? Victor? Are you there, Victor? Hello? Hello? Hello, Victor?